And now I'm going to go to Zoom. Zoom here. And I'm going to push resume. Okay.
All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this regular meeting of October 20th, 2021 to order. First, we'll both begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. There's no American flag in here, so I have on the laptop. So please rise and just repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So this is a zoning administrator meeting. It's a little bit more informal of a setting than the regular planning commission meetings. The zoning administrator meetings are held to handle certain project types in the city of Santa Ana, one of which is tentative parcel maps. The other one is minor exceptions, which are both on the agenda today. So moving on, we have copies of the agenda on the table over there. If anyone has any questions, is there anyone who'd like to speak on a non-agendized item today?
If you have comments on a non-agenda item, you can speak now. If you're here for an agenda item, we'll come to that at a later point. Okay, we do not have any speakers.
All right, thank you. The next part of the meeting is the business calendar. This is the public hearings. So we'll go over the process for a public hearing so that everyone knows what to expect. A public hearing will be opened after staff gives a presentation. So first the planners will give a presentation, then a public hearing will be open. The applicants for each item on the agenda will be given an opportunity to speak. That's limited to 15 minutes per applicant. After that, members of the public will be given up to 3 minutes to speak, and we'll have a timer to help you gauge time. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond to any comments that were made by the public, up to 5 minutes of response. And then the public hearing will be closed. There will be discussion, and then action will be taken on the application. So if you're going to be speaking today, please be sure to fill out a comment card. My colleagues to my left have some. And then secondly, when you are speaking, please state your name and your address. Your address is voluntary, but please state your name. State whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. And please include facts that are pertinent to your knowledge, and just avoid things like gossip, repetition, emotion. Clear, concise, and non-repetitive argument is most effective. So moving on then, on the calendar, the first item is item number 1, tentative parcel map number 2019-01 for the property located at 2828 North Flower Street. Please note that decision on this matter is final unless an appeal is filed within 10 calendar days. And with that, staff will now provide a brief verbal presentation. So Pedro, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, the first item is a request for an approval to subdivide an existing residential lot into 3 residential parcels at the property address as 2828 North Flower Street. The subject site is located on North Flower Street within the Morrison Park neighborhood, north of the Memory Lane and North Flowers intersection. The general plan designation for this property is low density, and the zoning is single family residential. The site is surrounded by residential uses on every direction. The existing lot is about 0.42 acres in size. That's approximately 18,295 square feet. And it's currently improved with an existing single family home, mature trees and vegetation. The applicant is seeking approval of a tentative parcel map to subdivide the existing parcel into 3 lots. Upon completion of the subdivision, the lots will continue to be used as residential. The proposed lots are designed to meet all of the development standards for the R1 single family zone. The newly created lots would have 57 feet of lot width and would be approximately 6,900 square feet in size. The minimum requirements in the R1 zone are 50 feet lot width and 6,000 square feet in lot size. During the project review process and the review of the proposed subdivision, staff did review conceptual design for single family residence on these lots. The purpose of the conceptual review was to ensure that The conceptual design of the homes met development standards for the R1 zone. This includes the setbacks, the lot coverage, the height, and the parking requirements beyond R1 zone. As reviewed, the conceptual residential design met all of those development standards. No major issues were identified with the subdivision proposal, since the design and the site improvements did not require any additional discretionary action or approvals. Staff did determine that the proposal as conditioned is consistent with the various zoning requirements, the general plan designations, including the lot size, the lot frontage, lot coverage, and parking. And further conditions of approval have been placed on this proposal to ensure that the site is consistent with the landscaping requirements and perimeter fencing consistent with the residential character of the neighborhood. Finally, the parcel map was found to be consistent with the California Subdivision Map Act and Chapter 34 of the city's municipal code. Therefore, staff is recommending that the zoning administrator adopt a resolution approving tentative parcel map 2019-01 as conditioned. That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. And just as a friendly reminder, if you haven't already done so, please put your phones on silent or airplane mode. It seems like Adele wanted to make a comment on this. Take that from Adele.
Yes.
With that, have we received any written communications?
Yes, for this item, there were 9 comments received. Those were distributed to the zoning administrator, and those are posted on our website for review.
Okay, thank you. And I went through each one of those comments and read them in detail. So thanks for distributing those. And then just to clarify before we begin taking public comments, this question for staff. So the site is currently zoned single family residence.
That's correct.
Okay. And is there a zone change application proposed as part of this?
There's none.
Okay, so the site's applicant is not proposing a zone change, just a simple subdivision, correct? Okay, thank you. So with that, we can open the public hearing, and would the applicant like to speak on the matter?
I'm Andy Bain. I represent Amateur LLC, which we the following that we would like to design, like Mr. Gomez presented. When we design, we take into consideration of the neighborhood. When we pick a neighborhood, and we want to develop something that go well in with the neighborhood. That's all we did. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and then let's see, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment?
Yes, you do have some speaker cards for the individuals that would like to comment.
Okay, and a friendly reminder, if you haven't already filled one out and you'd like to speak on this item, please do so with our commission secretary. And friendly reminder, the time to speak is limited to 3 minutes per person, so I'll set a countdown timer for 2 minutes and 30 seconds just to give people a heads up that their time is approaching. So the first card that I have is from an individual named Jimmy Cabral.
That's me. I defer, so I did actually email a comment in. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it. So I like to defer other folks here in the room first, and then if I want to add something in addition, I'll chime in later.
Okay,
Is that okay
thanks.
with you?
Yeah, we'll just
Thanks.
move your card to the end. Thank you. All right, the next speaker that I have is an individual named Jeff Adams.
Okay, I'm in the same boat here, the email also.
Okay, thank you. All right, third card is an individual named Sally Tate.
My comment has more to do with the house size than the lot. So do you want to hear it at this time
Yes.
or, okay. In your exhibit that you posted online, let's see, I wrote a message to myself. It states that it's going to, the homes would be similar to the homes in the neighborhood, and all the homes in the neighborhood are single-family dwellings as we established, but they're also one-story ranch homes. And I already went through the experience. I live straight across the street, and in my backyard, I have a 3-story monstrosity. And I was told by Shea Homes, not by the city, that no windows would directly look into my backyard. And there's more than a dozen windows that look directly into my backyard. So I just think it would look odd in the whole from Flower all the way from Santa Clara to the end of Flower, the cul-de-sac, there's only one two-story home, and that's all the way on the corner of Santa Clara and Flower. So I oppose having two-story homes.
Thank you.
That's
Anything
pretty
else?
much it. No,
Thank you. The next individual that I have is Nan Lisak. Thank you.
I have two quick questions. I live right next door to the property at 2822 North Flower. So I have a concern with, are there any safeguards going to be put in place to protect our property from the demolition?
Thank you. And then go ahead with your second question.
Okay, my second question is, has anybody considered the historic value of this property?
Thank you. And then were there any comments or questions that you want to share?
That was it.
Thank you. And then going back to Jimmy Cabral.
Thank you. So I'm new to the neighborhood, been there for a year. I've been attracted to that general area that I call the park communities, Morrison, Floral, West Floral, and Fisher. Been a Santa Ana resident for 9 years, more in the South Coast area before, which is a more dense area. Part of the reason, the attraction to Morrison Park is that it's less dense and the style of the neighborhood, the big white street of North Flower, the large lively streets, and the single family, one-story homes, and that it's less dense. My issue with subdividing this into 3 lots is that that's going to take away from that character. But I'm concerned that now that this will be seen as an opportunity for property owners or developers to seek out similarly situated properties or parcels to start subdividing. And it may not happen in a year or 2 years, but it won't be long before the entire community can change. And I think that can happen in less than a decade if you start allowing property owners to subdivide a large lots. Because that's part of the attraction of living in that neighborhood, that the lots are healthy sizes, right? Probably within 7,000 to 8,000 square feet for a single lot. I believe 2828 is 2 parcels. But if you were just to look at it individually, it's probably about 7,000 to 8,000 square feet in the lot size. And I think you're now opening the door for future developments similar to this, and it's going to change the neighborhood. That's my strong opposition. And I feel that, I don't know, Mr. Dang, if you're a resident of the neighborhood or not. I don't know anything about you and your company other than what I've looked online. There's not much other than you are in current suspension status with your LLC, with the Franchise Tax Board. That generally means you haven't paid something, taxes, filing fees, etc. But I think that the members of the community that live there should have a say in what the community is going to look like in the future. And I have 2 young kids, and I want the community to maintain as much as possible its current character. And part of that is single story, single family residences, large lots. And I don't want to see a densely populated community.
Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder to the applicant, at the end of the comments, you'll have an additional opportunity to make any final comments that you'd like. Moving on. Thank you, Mr. Cabral. To Jeff Adams again.
Okay, yeah, I'm kind of the same boat he is. I'm the longest living person in this neighborhood. I've been there since 60.
Oh,
I've been there since 63, when I
okay.
first moved in there. And I was around the corner in 59, so I don't think anybody got me beat there. You know, and I remember 18 acres of orange groves being to the north of me, which the one part of half that lot is the last remaining orange tree from that orange grove. You know, and I just see more and more houses on smaller and smaller lots being built, you know, Farmers Insurance had a really nice orange grove. Now they put, you know, how many houses on 4 acres or 8 acres, whatever it was. And it's just same thing, you know, I can see the houses from my house. And when you're in the, like, her backyard or my neighbor's backyard, it's just, and that's what we're gonna have. All of a sudden, you're gonna have all this. You know, I can see 2 single-story houses. You can build nice, big 2 houses. You can still get the square footage, and it won't be 2 stories. Plus, we're in a drought. Why are we adding more water meters? You know, if we gotta go into rationing, but now here we go, we're putting more straws in the soda. I don't understand that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Anyone else?
No, not this time.
Thank you.
Can I make another comment?
Um,
I don't know your rules.
you can make it quick. You had.
No,
your
just
time.
that it said, the house that is existing on the lot, it was built at a time of asbestos and lead paint, and I just would like to make sure that some containment measures are taken when it is taken down.
Thank you.
I understand that. It's gonna blow down.
No, I don't think so. It's pretty well.
All right, so thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to make a comment?
I'd like to make a comment if you want to hand me a sheet.
Sure, go ahead while you.
My name is Chris Weeksback. I live at 2822 North Tower, which is house with the 28 lot. My concern is, we're starting to see rentals move into the area, which, 3, 5 bedroom houses, that's gonna be parking on the street, and it's already somewhat limited. Particularly since the house across from this property has renters in it, and they have 8 vehicles. So I'm concerned about parking effect there. Because they already intend on our parking area in front of the house a lot. So it is a concern about the parking and the 2-story nature of it. And I also am very concerned about how many varmints are gonna come out of that house and fill the other houses in the area.
All right, and then anyone else before we move on? Thank you. Okay, thank you. And then lastly, does the applicant have any final remarks that you'd like to say? You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for showing up today, neighbor. When we did the plan, we follow strict lead guidelines. And we go back and forth and make sure that everything is compliant. And we give the develop, we try to develop 3 nice single family home that everything with the neighborhood. And then when we do demo, we try to protect all the, especially your property right next to our property. We'll continue to take that into consideration, and we'll make sure that there's no effect will come from the demolition.
I know the house is full of termites, so they're gonna spread like wildfire unless you take some kind of action.
Thank you.
Usually termite rain.
So with that, the
So may I interject? Can I have a question for the applicant or for maybe for you, Mr. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
no worries, it's Ali.
Ali?
Yes.
Are there, so I know it's zoned or proposal is for single family residents, but is there any requirements that it's used as a primary residence and not as a rental? Because like other of my neighbors here commented, yes, that is already a concern. I too also live next to a home property and does not live there, and there's at least 2 if not 3 families in there already, and that's a concern that I have as well. The parking and just, again, the density of the neighborhood is just gonna increase.
Thank you. We can ask staff to clarify and provide responses to some of the questions that came up
Okay.
during everyone's comments, so thank you for that. So if there's no final remarks by the applicant, then we can go ahead and close the public hearing. So thank you for all the comments and questions. So we do have some questions already, and then I'll ask some additional ones of Mr. Gomez. So the first one is, can you please elaborate a little bit more on what are these sort of prevailing lot sizes of the neighborhood right now?
Sure. Have a quick look at the, not just Flower Street, but Olive Street, kind of the surrounding neighborhoods along Orange. For the most part, the lot range is between 6,000 to 8,000 square feet. We have some 6,500 square foot lots, 8,500 square foot lots. But for the most part, they do range between 6 and 8. This one proposed is 6,099, so it's in keeping with that range, in keeping with those developments.
Okay, thank you for that. And then secondly, what's the prevailing lot frontage along that block?
Along Flower specifically, the setback requirements for the front yard range between 20 to 25 feet.
Thank you. So that's setback. And then what about the lot frontage?
It should be about the same, same sort of like frontage requirement. Oh, I'm sorry. The frontage requirement is actually 60 on average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, and then can you also elaborate if this property was analyzed for any sort of eligibility for historic preservation?
It was. So as the staff report kind of indicates, there's some association with Wrong Way, Oregon. The association was mostly on his famous or infamous, however you look at it, transcontinental flight. He ended up in Ireland when he wasn't supposed to. There isn't anything that happened on this site specifically besides him relocating to this location, buying 18 acres of land, raising a family here. I think at some point there was some keeping and storage of some of the flight equipment at that, but it has since been relocated. So there's no significant historical event that happened there besides its association with him living there. The property, normally when we look at the assessment for historic homes, we take a look at the integrity of the house and the integrity of the site. I hope that means that you will agree with me that there isn't any sort of integrity left. So in our assessment, the property isn't eligible for this replacement. But we are taking into account the association with the famous individual, and we are requiring that a plaque be placed on one of the lots to memorialize the association with the wrong report.
Okay, thank you. You said that that was a recommended condition of approval in the resolution.
Correct.
And that has been approved?
That's what we're here to consider today. Thank you. So, okay, I appreciate that. And then secondly, so the applicant submitted plan drawings that you mentioned in your verbal report that were conceptual in nature. So today's action is just being requested to subdivide the lots and not necessarily to have the plans approved that were submitted. If you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure. As mentioned in the verbal report, the reason we asked for conceptual design for some of these residential properties is to ensure that the lot that's being subdivided is more than adequate to accommodate those prevailing setbacks, the side setbacks, the lot coverage. And that exercise allows us to ensure that those development standards are met. And through that exercise, we did ensure that the conceptual design of a two-story home would meet those development standards and be in keeping with those prevailing setbacks, lot coverage requirements, the overall height, and the parking considerations too.
Thank you. And then for the benefit of the record, could you please describe if the site were to be subdivided, what would be the process to then build an individual single family home on each one of those lots?
Right, so typically how it works is absent from the action of the subdivision, any or any new proposed development, single family home would still have to go to the planning division for review and approval to ensure that the standards are still consistent with what the conceptual review was, to ensure that the city design guidelines are met, and that ensures that the neighborhood character is kept. So there's still an additional process that staff goes through with the property owners to ensure that part of it.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of demolition of the home, I know that today's action doesn't necessarily affect the ability to demolish that structure, but what would be the typical demolition process for a single family home? And what sort of documentation is required to be submitted as part of any sort of like structural demolition permit?
Sure. The action to demolish the existing house now would still require a building permit. So there's still a review from our staff administratively. The building department, for example, takes a look at asbestos reports. They require a air quality district report as well. And I think there's a certain 10 days before the demolition of that structure that the report has to be given. So there are measures that staff takes to ensure that the demolition of the structure doesn't impact any of the adjacent properties, and that's to ensure maybe, putting barriers so there's no dust or water that leaks into it. So there are measures taken to protect adjacent residences.
Okay, thank you. And then just continuing along some of the questions that were raised. So are you aware of any zoning code or state local laws that allow the city of Santa Ana to prevent the houses from being rented out or just require that they be owner occupied?
I'm not
Okay,
not aware of any that would require it to be a primary residence, unfortunately.
okay. And Council John, if you don't mind us, are you aware of any laws that would allow a local jurisdiction to limit occupancy to owner occupancy, assuming it was just developed with a single family home?
Under the circumstances that we're discussing today, no.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate all the information that you shared. It's very helpful. So based on the analysis in the report, it appears that the applicant, their proposal to subdivide the site into the 3 new lots, each lot would either meet or exceed the city's minimums for lot frontage and lot size. You had mentioned that the minimum lot frontage required by our code is 50 feet, and the applicant's proposing 57-foot frontages.
Correct.
Okay, so a little bit larger than normal, at least the minimum required by the code. And you'd also mentioned the minimum lot size is 6,000 in Santa Ana, and that these would each be about 6,100 square feet, more or less.
Approximately.
Okay, thank you. I do have concerns about neighborhood compatibility and the sort of structures that could ultimately be built on the site. However, the Subdivision Map Act makes it clear that when a subdivision proposal is submitted to the city, that if it meets or exceeds the minimums established by local ordinance, that the city essentially must approve that parcel map unless it can be found again that it's not in compliance or would lead to sort of disorderly development, irregular lot shapes and all that. And based on the exhibits and information that I've heard and saw, although it does seem that there are definitely large lots in that neighborhood in general, that these lots do exceed or meet the minimum standards by the Santa Ana Municipal Code. So nonetheless, I just want to run through a few things, some notes that I took here on the application. The first is just a general comment. I noticed that the resolution template makes reference to commissioners. I don't know if post, just for the record, post action day, we should probably update that to just be the zoning administrator. And then secondly, that again, just to clarify for the record that the applicant is only seeking approval today of the subdivision and not of any single family home applications that have been submitted. So we haven't received any specific new single family residence applications yet for each site, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Will there be a public hearing based on those plans or?
So the Santa Ana Municipal Code states that if a new single family residence meets all the development standards of the code, then it doesn't need a public hearing.
Okay.
But if, for example, there's an issue with height or setbacks or anything, then that would trigger the need for a public hearing.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you. Then based on the information and the city's minimum code requirements for frontage and lot size and the information that was presented today, I am inclined to adopt a resolution approving the subdivision, given that it does meet the minimums that the city's ordinances require for this subdivision. However, I would like to also suggest a handful of additional conditions of approval to ensure that the city's design standards are met when each single family home is submitted, to take into account neighborhood compatibility and some of the concerns that have been raised. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to your resolution. Go through the conditions of approval. So the first question I have for the applicant is, have you read the conditions of approval?
Yes,
And do you agree to them? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then secondly, I saw the condition of approval about the commemorative plaque to honor the sort of historical legacy on the site. And that was, which condition number, can you remind me again?
Don't have it in front of me, but I'm publishing.
There's a
Is it
packet.
in this packet?
Yes,
I believe it's number 8, actually. Well, thank you.
the packet.
Thank you. It's condition number 8. So I just want to make sure the applicant understands that and understands the sort of value of that association with the neighborhood. And we'll follow through with that, that condition of approval.
Sure, that's actually one of the reasons why we bought the property, because of the status.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd also like to add a condition of approval that reiterates the fact that each individual home, should the applicant end up recording the final map, that each individual home that's built on the site must submit a distinct new residential application to the city. That each residential application shall be reviewed for conformance with the city's zoning and design standards. Ensure neighborhood compatibility. Including but not limited to items such as massing, window placement, and prevailing setback.
Zoning administrator, can you please repeat the last part of your condition, including massing, window placement, and
Prevailing setback. Actually, it should say including but not limited to. Okay, and then with that, I would also like to reiterate for those who might be interested that the action of the zoning administrator is final unless appealed within 10 calendar days. Procedurally, zoning administrator actions for parcel maps go from here. They're final, but then the next step would be that the applicant goes through a technical review with our city's public works agency and then records the final map subject to city council approval. However, if someone from the community wishes to file an appeal, they have 10 calendar days to do so. And that calendar day, I believe, starts tomorrow. And if the 10th calendar day falls on a day that City Hall is closed, then it bumps to the day that we're open. You can use like a date calculator online to calculate that if you're interested, and all appeals are subject to a filing fee. That is just standard municipal code, and I like to get that disclaimer at every meeting for the public's benefit.
Is that filed, where is that filed?
You can file it, it's all in our code, but you can file it with the applications on the planning division webpage. And if you have any questions about that, in the spirit of transparency, you can always contact the case planner. The application, the fee are online, and you file it with either the planner or the city clerk's office. You have 2 options. And you have to file it in person with the fee. With that, if there's any questions following this action approved with the added condition and the recommended conditions of approval, this matter is closed, but if any member of the community has any questions about today's action and what steps are available, you can always speak with Mr. Gomez outside this room because we have another item today. So thank you everyone for taking the time to attend.
Just one last housekeeping. So I've noticed we were taking, secretary was taking down notes. Are those available anywhere?
The minutes will be published
Minutes.
online. Yeah. Thank you.
and also the and the meeting's recorded. So after this meeting, you can go to our city webpage, which I'm sure it's linked on your and you'll see the YouTube video. So these are just very it's just a summary. You can listen to the audio for the detail. Okay.
Same website that was on the agenda packet and notices that you received is where you'll find the minutes of recording.
All right.
So thank you. If you were here for item number 1, I just kindly ask that you step outside.
I just want to say that I'm extremely pleased that the owner, owner is doing some kind of memorial plaque to for Longway Corridor's acknowledgement, because he was a really celebrity, and not only did he, live here and everything, but something that Santa Ana should really be proud of. The fact that this man did so much, he was a mechanic for Lindbergh during, when Charles Lindbergh's child was kidnapped. He had, tapes of him speaking to the Queen of England in an interview. They did a ticker tape parade. I mean, there's so much history there that's involved that there's no way they could continue having a house there. But having a plaque, and if you need any help with verbiage on it, I'm happy to help you. I've been involved with the Historic Society off and on for several years, so I'm really pleased to want to acknowledge that. I'm glad the city of Santa Ana is going along with that. We've been a resident of Santa Ana for over 35 years at that particular location, so this is really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know where I live. Okay.
Here you go. Just in there for your questions.
For that. And then, thank you.
No, because there's
All right, moving on to item number 2. And I didn't thank you for your patience on all that. So this is the time and place for public hearing on item number 2. This is the exception, application number 2021-02, property located at 1201 East 4th Street. So please note, again, decision on this matter is final unless appealed within 10 days. Staff will now make a brief verbal presentation. I just thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zoning Administrator. Good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, this application is a minor exception for a front yard fence. The property is located at 1201 East 4th Street, which is northeast corner of Eastwood and 4th Street in close proximity to Grand Avenue. As indicated, the request is for a front yard fence. The use of the property, and as it has always been since 1946, is an industrial type use, although the zoning at the time was commercial. At the time the building was constructed in 46, there was a meat processing facility. As I mentioned, the zoning was commercial, but there was also a variance issued for the property to construct an addition to the building to construct an office on the 2nd floor. A few years later, in 1982, an ice cream business moved in, and the property suffered some structural fire, but as the non-conforming section of the code allows, it was allowed to reconstruct. And currently, the tenant that we have, Chili William, moved in 2020 to operate an ice cream business. At the time, since 2020, and obviously with the pandemic situation, staff levels have been low, and the applicant has indicated that typically there's 1 to 3 individuals in the building at all times, so the concerns for safety has always been there. And during the time, the business has been broken into 3 times, therefore the application for a request. So as indicated in the staff report, the request is for a 7-foot wrought iron fence that will be located along the entire perimeter of 4th Street and Eastwood. With that, the property is also serviced with 3 current driveway types, 1 along 4th Street, 2 along Eastwood. Staff has reviewed the request to construct a 7-foot wrought iron fence for the purpose of reducing illegal access to the site and obviously providing a safer working environment for the individuals. With that recommendation, staff has also indicated that there should be a slight modification to the fence plan, where you can see in the resolution, staff recommended that the fence along the 4th Street portion should be shifted back closer to the building. And the reason for that is after review with Public Works, the trash enclosure location is actually tucked away behind the parking stalls located along 4th Street. So in order to provide a safe access and circulation for the trash truck, staff recommended to shift that fence back. The other recommendation that staff has made is along the 3rd driveway apron or approach that is located closer to the single family on the north side of the property. To close that out, as part of closing that out, the applicant has proposed a manual gate at that location, but with the recommendation from staff would be to provide a permanent fence And by providing the permanent fence, the driveway apron would need to be removed for city standards, but also to increase the landscaping planter that is located between both driveway aprons. The purpose for that would be, obviously, the site is legal non-conforming, but creating additional landscaping would bring it into closer compliance. And with that, staff concludes presentation. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. That was very helpful. At this time, just want to confirm with you before we open the public hearing. So the use has been industrial in nature since the site was constructed in 1946.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned there was some sort of like use entitlement. Was it a use variance or something?
In 1974, there was a use variance allowed to construct an addition to that meat processing facility. And that addition consisted of just the office component on the second floor.
Okay, thanks. And then now, just to confirm, it is in the transit zoning code, urban neighborhood subzone, as you said in your report. It's not part of the overlay or anything.
No, it does not have the overlay.
Thank you. All right, then, Madam Secretary, have you gotten any written communication?
Yes, one letter was received and distributed, and it's posted on our website.
Thank you. And then, was that the one from Mr. Tardy?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Read and thoroughly went through that one, so thank you for sharing that one. With that, the public hearing is now open, and we'd like to give an opportunity to ask them to speak. You have up to 15 minutes.
My name is Mike Rowland. I work for WT Duran Incorporated. We're the contractor who did the remodel of the existing location. We gutted the whole building and redid the whole thing. We walk in freezers, coolers, all new equipment, and new concrete floor. It's a very nice building inside. We left upstairs alone. It's just basically storage. The problem is that we're facing, we were only allowed to put a 4-foot high fence around this property. Well, it doesn't do any good at all. There's lots of transients that come and congregate in here. We do have lights on the building that are on all night long. Doesn't seem to even slow them down. They have broken in the building 3 times. A 4-foot high fence isn't going to do anything to stop those people from getting in there. Jade works there a lot of times by herself. Right now we have a temporary fence up here that she has to get out, manually open, bring her car in, close it, lock it again. Even in that amount of time, people will walk inside there when she's trying to get on the property. So I've got some samples of other people in the area. This is the guy right across the street. This is 8 foot high. It's right across the street. This one here is 7 or 8 feet high. This is right down the street. This guy here, he's got razor wire on this fence at 8 feet high. These are all within very close proximity. Here is our building, and here's the other ones that I have pictures of. You know, these are solid. You can't even see through them when you go to back out. What our option or what our question is, if these people were allowed to do this, why can't we have a 7 foot high fence? We're not going to put razor wire on it. We're not going to put these spikes on it. We just want to keep people from climbing up on the thing and getting in on the property. So that's where we're concerned, is how come they can do it and we can't, basically. I just was talking to Ivan this morning, and he said that we may have to move this fence way in here to get the trash truck in here. The trash enclosure right now is right here. This is the first I heard about this, moving this fence. That's not going to do us any good. People will come in here and congregate in this parking lot like they have been. It won't do us any good at all. This fence needs to be on the outside of the property. If it makes sense, we can move this trash enclosure over here and maybe put a gate on the face of it out here. We can have our drafting department go over a few different options to satisfy that, if that's one of the concerns. Definitely blocking off this curb cut right here. I mean, this street's very busy. I can see the concern about having somebody waiting out here to pull a truck in here. But that doesn't need to happen. We can cordon that off. And this one doesn't even need to be here, this gate. But this sliding gate would be the main access to the property, with an electric control, with a Knox device for the fire department to get in case of an emergency. we're willing to do whatever we have to do to conform to get this thing in here, but we really need it to be all the way on the outside of the property. What they do is they get in this planter area, they defecate in there, there's drug use, there's a tree right here, and they all seem to like to sit around that thing, and there's empty beer bottles and trash and needles, and it's very scary. To be honest with you, the owner of the property told me that if he'd have known that, he would have never bought this property. If he has seen what goes on around there, fortunately, it's too late now and the building's complete, but he's very concerned for Jade's safety when she works there. Well, that's where we're at with it. Again, I don't know, how come aren't these people gonna get cited for this? If that's against the law? You know, I don't know. If they can do it, how come we can't do it? Is basically what we're getting at.
Sure, thank you. And did you have anything else you want to share?
No, that's it. Well, we'll do whatever it takes to conform. If we need to move some stuff around, like the trash enclosure, it's worth it to the owner to do whatever we need to be able to get this 7-foot fence up around the whole property.
Thank you. All right, and then moving on. So do you have any members of the public that would like to comment?
I think Jade wanted to say something.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, she has one.
Oh, thanks. Go ahead.
So I am the main cook for the kitchen, so I have to be at the building the most, and I'm often there alone. The neighbors have been quite friendly. It's mostly the people who come through the neighborhood that have been kind of a problem for me. I've had people approach me and try to stop my car from leaving. I've had someone chase my car yelling. I've had people sneak into the fence. They've cut holes into the existing fence we have right now, and they refuse to get off the property. I find it very disagreeable to have to sweep up aluminum foil bits with burn marks on it and picking up needles and such as part of my job. And I really just want, since the inside of the building looks so nice, and since we bought this place in an opportunity zone to help the area like look a little better, it would be nice to be able to feel safe to go outside, clean up the area, and to make it like a nice planting area inside of the fence. Like, we want to spiff up the place so that it looks nice. And right now it feels pretty unsafe to be outside. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And technically, as applicant, is there anything you'd like to comment on at the end?
No, I think I've said all I can say.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate all the input. With the speaker card, thank you. So just want to go through a few things similar to the first item that was on the agenda. So I know the applicant has kindly provided photos of surrounding fences, and I know I in your report also had some. Can you comment on the status of those fences? Not necessarily every single one, but by and large, are some of these fences, to your knowledge, are they grandfathered in, or are they permitted, or were they built without permits?
Yes, after taking a look at the photos that was provided as part of the packet and taking a survey along 4th Street, the majority of those properties are used for commercial or industrial uses, and the properties that provided a fence that exceeded the 4-foot max, staff was able to take a look at some street view images of previous years, and some of those years actually went before the fence ordinance kicked in. So the majority of these fences are legal non-conforming, with the exception of a couple that were found to be modified.
Okay. And not that today's purpose of the meeting is to necessarily like call out anyone who built things without permits, but if we did discover items that were, fences or anything that were put up without permits or modified without permits, we should follow up with those with our code enforcement division. So thank you for that research. It is definitely an area in transition, so I appreciate all the photos that were brought. Okay, regarding the comment about possibly having to redesign the location of the fence, today's meeting is for, let's say, a decision on the zoning code applicability to your proposal. So whether I approve or deny it, let's say I approve it, we cannot supersede other agencies' requirements for access. So let's say planning ultimately is okay with a fence along the property line.
Mhm.
That doesn't allow you necessarily to supersede waste management's access requirements, or that doesn't allow you to supersede like Orange County Fire Authority's requirements.
Mhm.
So if something still needs to be modified, as long as it's modified in a manner that doesn't worsen or exacerbate or go beyond today's approval, that's okay.
Okay.
But if let's say you have to end up pulling back the fence or shrinking it, whatever, that's fine. But if you have to, like, for example, let's say we're approving a 7-foot tall fence today and you need to make it now 9 feet tall. To go beyond today's approval would be not allowed. So as long as you're modifying in a way that kind of like lessens it, it's okay. It's in spirit with the approval today. So I just want to make sure that you understand the fact that even if today we were to approve the fence, it doesn't allow you to sort of supersede waste management or OCFA. You'll have to continue to coordinate with that.
So we have to get together with them with the site plan and have it okay by them before we actually do it. Okay,
Correct.
that's fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, and then as project manager and case planner, Ivan's responsibility is to sort of guide you through that as well.
Okay,
So you'll have that single point of contact. You don't have to keep fishing around.
so Ivan, is this from the waste management that they want to move this fencing here? Is that their concern or is it the city planner?
No, the comment about the fence was after consulting Public Works, but not specifically the person in charge of the waste management contracting and review. It
Okay.
was a general development
Okay.
person. Typically, when we ask them, it's to get a general response of how much stacking distance is required or access to and from for the trash trucks.
Okay,
Specifically in this situation, as recommended by the zoning administrator, you'll still have to go through a plan check process.
Okay.
And that plan check process will be reviewed by planning, building, OCFA. And specifically the waste management liaison, Christy Kindig will be involved with that. You mentioned earlier this morning, and maybe for the record, that the current process to pick up the trash is to roll it out.
Yeah, so
which I was unaware of.
and we roll it out from the enclosure out to the sidewalk out here. And then the guy takes it from there over to, he parks the truck in the street, like he does every other apartment building down the street. And they roll it out, dump it, push it back in, and we push it back over. to
And
the
if we
enclosure.
fail to do so, they just don't pick it up, they
Yeah.
don't seem to have a problem with us.
And we're fine with doing that. We're fine with getting that off the property and accessible, so the trash truck doesn't have to come on the property.
So you're currently wheeling the bin out all the way off your fire property and off the sidewalk.
We are, and it's a small one, and it doesn't even get half full. You
And
don't
it's a
generate a
big
lot of
sidewalk,
traffic.
so it's not blocking traffic.
And you stated that the neighboring properties have the same sort of service arrangement.
They do, there's several apartment buildings down here, and they roll the dumpsters out, and they let them sit on the sidewalk. Basically, the truck comes and he grabs them, pulls them, puts them back over. They don't drive onto the properties.
Okay.
At least I haven't seen them do it.
So in light of the new information, then maybe I'll follow up with Christy Kindig to understand whether or not that process will still continue.
Okay.
And if that's the case, then staff would be inclined to maybe recommend the relocation of the trash enclosure so that the property can be sealed off. That may be.
If we're gonna still move the trash out ourselves, I don't see why we need to move the enclosure over here unless we're gonna create an access to it, but then you can't get up the curb. So really, if we can just keep on pushing this out here, we'll leave it where it is, the trash enclosure, but we're more than happy to block this one off and block this off and just have one sliding gate.
So the best I could recommend if we get on the path of approval is that you just continue that coordination as we're talking about. So
Okay.
just make sure that it's minimally disruptive to the current situation in that.
Okay,
So, all right, thank you. And then let's see if I had any other questions. Do you guys, as applicants, do you currently store any materials or products outside, or is everything within the building?
everything's inside.
All right, so, given the information and most importantly, given the sort of existing site plan, I am inclined to also want to approve this application simply because most industrial users have an arrangement where the building sort of is oriented more toward the front of the site and acts as that sort of natural security and sort of natural wall. Your areas are usually parking and storage areas that are fenced off with fences that are up to 8 to 10 feet tall per our code. But by by just virtue of how this site was originally constructed, with the building being so far in the back. It's almost like an inverted plan. And given that sort of unusual and constricted lot size and the placement of the building and how it was built in the 40s, I think there is a case to be made that the strict application of the code kind of denies you the same sort of benefits that a normal property owner would have had the site been built in a traditional site plan. So with that, I would like to move forward with adopting a resolution to approve it, but with some condition modifications. So the first would be, this is just to reiterate code, but I just want it to be on the record for your knowledge, that if the site were ever redeveloped, so expanded significantly or just scraped and rebuilt, that the fence would have to be removed and that basically a new project would be submitted. So this fence is basically being approved, recognizing the fact that the existing condition merits it. So I'm open to awarding recording secretary or Ivan, if you just want to say, to the effect of that, the improvements associated with the taller fence be removed upon significant expansion beyond the non-conforming code and for a full redevelopment of the site. And in case the property owner ever sells the property, these conditions go with the next owner.
Sure.
They'll have to acknowledge and understand it. Secondly, and this is already code, but it's just more to be absolutely clear that outdoor storage is prohibited in this front area unless it's fully screened and placed in full accordance with what the Santa Ana Municipal Code allows. But given the sort of site orientation and the design that you're proposing, outdoor storage with this sort of configuration would normally not be allowed, especially the obstructed required parking.
Sure.
So I just want that to be on the record too, in the conditions that no outdoor storage is permitted unless in full accordance with the Santa Ana Municipal Code. And then thirdly, and probably lastly, that the final design of the fence and design meaning placement, height, everything, final design shall conform to any waste collection and Orange County Fire Authority requirements. And then all the other conditions, have you read the conditions and do you agree to that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to interject as far as the condition that was placed to shift the fence, would that be modified as well?
Let's take a look at it. Thank you. What
Condition
condition?
4, I believe,
Thanks. It shall obtain a building permit as necessary for the proposed 7-foot high fence. The portion of the fence along 4th Street frontage will need to be set back to allow vehicle access from 4th Street, allowing full use of the parking area. We could say will need to be set back as needed. Thanks. And then let's actually put instead of having to see a new condition, thanks, Ivan. Let's just modify that, and then the condition goes on to say the final fence design will need to meet all safety requirements, visibility, including those stated in the Santa Ana Municipal Code section. You could add another sentence saying, in addition, the fence design shall conform to any waste collection and Orange County Fire Authority requirements. Let's just do that as a modification.
clean up.
Yeah, thank you.
So I would even add it to the fire authority again, but this plan is showing.
It's part of the review.
Oh, it is, okay. And same with the waste management, okay.
Okay, and then for the record, I know there's no one from the public here, opposing it, but for the record, this action to approve with the modified conditions is final unless it's appealed within 10 calendar days. The calendar days begin counting tomorrow. And again, if the 10th day falls on a day that City Hall is closed, then it defaults to the next day that we're open for business. The appeal needs to be filed either with planning or with the city clerk's office and is subject to a fee. And then otherwise, if no appeal is filed, then this action is final. The reason I'm stating that for the record too is that if for some reason you find that these conditions are something that you cannot agree to, we usually try to have the department work to meet the spirit of like substantially conforming to those conditions, or if there's one that you discover just totally breaks the project, then you can actually appeal the approval for the condition.
Within that 10 days?
Within 10 days.
Okay, that's fair.
It's rare, but I just thought I'd put that on the record
Okay.
for your knowledge. And with that, I don't have any further comments, so thank you, Ivan, and thank you everyone else for supporting today's meeting, and we're adjourned.
Thank you very much, all.